November 12th, 1980. The phone rang in Bob Dylan's Malibu home at 7:30 in the morning. Dylan, never an early riser, almost didn't answer, but something made him reach for the receiver. "Bob, it's John." Dylan sat up. "John Lennon." Calling him. At 7:30 in the morning California time, which meant it was 10:30 in New York. Lennon had been up for hours. "Hey John, everything all right?" Lennon's voice was different than Dylan remembered. Lighter, happier. The last time they'd really talked was years ago, passing conversations at industry events, mutual respect expressed through nods and brief exchanges. "Everything's brilliant, mate. I'm back." Dylan knew what that meant. Lennon had spent the last 5 years in retirement, raising his son Sean, living the domestic life. But now he was recording again. Double Fantasy was about to drop, and Lennon was calling people he'd wanted to work with for years. "I heard you're recording," Dylan said. "That's not why I'm calling." Lennon paused. "I want to work with you. Real collaboration. You and me in a studio. Writing, recording. What do you say?" Dylan felt something shift. He and Lennon had circled each other for 15 years. The Beatles had been influenced by Dylan's folk revolution. Dylan had been influenced by their pop genius. But they'd never created together. "When?" Dylan asked. "December, mid-month. Record plan in New York. You could fly out for a few days." Dylan looked at his calendar. December was open. But this was John Lennon. This was the collaboration people had been waiting for since 1964. "December 12th, Dylan said. "I'll be there." Lennon laughed, that famous cackle. "Brilliant. I'll have the studio booked. This is going to be something, Bob. I can feel it." They talked for 20 more minutes. Music, politics, their kids. When Dylan hung up, he sat in silence. Something was beginning, something important, but neither knew they had less than 4 weeks left. Bob Dylan and John Lennon had been dancing around each other since 1964. The Beatles arrived in America that February. Dylan was already a folk icon. The Beatles were pop stars, screamed at by teenagers, but Lennon saw through the divide. He recognized in Dylan's lyrics what most missed. Not just protest, poetry, surrealism. Dylan wasn't just writing about social issues. He was deconstructing language itself. In August 1964, Dylan introduced the Beatles to marijuana at the Delmonico Hotel. That night, over joints and laughter, two musical revolutions recognized each other. They influenced each other without collaborating. Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man inspired the Beatles' drug period. The Beatles' studio innovations inspired Dylan's Blonde on Blonde. They were in conversation through their music, but they'd never worked together. A few meetings, some mutual praise, but no songs, no recordings. There had been opportunities. In 1968, Lennon had floated the idea, but Dylan was recovering from his motorcycle accident. In 1971, they'd crossed paths but not connected. Timing had always been wrong, until November 1980. Lennon was finally at peace. Lawsuits settled, immigration battles won, 5 years with his son, now ready to make music again, and the first person he called was Dylan. Dylan had heard the passion in Lennon's voice, the excitement. John Lennon at 40 sounded like John Lennon at 25. Full of ideas, full of life. They were finally going to make the record everyone had been waiting for. Or so they thought. Over 2 weeks, Dylan and Lennon talked 3 more times. Each conversation added detail. This wouldn't be casual. This would be proper collaboration, writing together, recording together. Lennon wanted the record plant in New York, same studio where he'd done Double Fantasy. Dylan agreed. He'd fly in December 11th, start December 12th, give themselves a week. "No pressure," Lennon said on November 28th. "Just two blokes making music. If it's brilliant, brilliant. If it's just good, that's fine too." But Dylan heard the excitement beneath Lennon's casual tone. This mattered. A Dylan-Lennon collaboration would be historic. They discussed song ideas. Lennon had fragments. Dylan had half-finished lyrics. But mostly they wanted to write fresh, see what happened when their sensibilities collided. "I've been listening to Blood on the Tracks," Lennon said. "That's a masterpiece, Bob." Dylan was surprised. Lennon wasn't known for praising others. Imagine is pretty good too, Dylan smiled. Lennon laughed. Yeah, that one worked out all right. December 12th through 18th, a week in the studio. Record plant would tape everything. This is going to be remembered, Lennon said November 30th, their last conversation. When people talk about great collaborations, this will be one of them. Dylan believed him. Everything was aligned. The session was 12 days away, 12 days until music history would be made, except history had other plans. December 8th, 1980, Monday morning. John Lennon woke up in the Dakota at 7:30 a.m. His son Sean was already awake. Yoko was making breakfast. Lennon felt good, better than he'd felt in years. Double Fantasy was selling well, and in 4 days Bob Dylan would arrive for their session. That morning Lennon did a radio interview. He mentioned the Dylan collaboration. Bob and I have been circling each other for years. It's time we actually made music together. After Lennon and Yoko went to a photo session with Annie Leibovitz for Rolling Stone, the famous photograph. Lennon naked, curled against Yoko, a man at peace. Around 5 p.m., Lennon went to the record plant for mixing work. The studio was booked for December 12th. Everything was ready. Lennon spent hours preparing, making sure it would be perfect for their collaboration. At 10:30 p.m., Lennon and Yoko left the studio. Their limousine dropped them at the Dakota's entrance. December was cold, but Lennon was warm, happy. 4 more days. As he walked toward the entrance, a voice called out, "Mr. Lennon?" John turned. A man in shadows, marked David Chapman. He'd been waiting for hours. Chapman raised a .38 revolver. 5 seconds. 5 seconds that ended everything. The future, the collaboration, the music that would never be made. 5 shots. 4 hit. John Lennon collapsed. The doorman rushed. Yoko screamed. Police arrived. Squad car to Roosevelt Hospital. At 11:07 p.m., doctors pronounced John Lennon dead. He was 40 years old. 4 days away from recording with Bob Dylan. 4 days away from creating the music they'd planned for 16 years. The collaboration ended before it began. Bob Dylan was in Malibu when the phone rang. 11:30 p.m. New York time, 8:30 p.m. California. Dylan had just finished dinner, thinking about the session. 4 days. He needed to start preparing. The phone interrupted. Dylan answered. "Bob, it's Howard." His voice was shaking. "Turn on the television, right now." Dylan walked to the living room. He turned on the TV. ABC. The anchor's face was grave. Behind him, a photograph of John Lennon. Dylan's blood went cold. "We have confirmation that John Lennon has been shot outside his New York apartment. He was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital where he was pronounced dead." Dylan didn't hear the rest. The phone slipped from his hand. 4 days. They were 4 days away. December 12th. The session, everything they'd planned, gone. For the next hour, Dylan sat watching coverage. Every channel. The same story. John Lennon shot. John Lennon dead. Mark David Chapman arrested. A fan who'd gotten Lennon's autograph earlier that day. Then waited. Then killed. The television showed footage from outside the Dakota. Fans gathering. Crying. Holding candles. Imagine. Playing over and over. Dylan couldn't process it. 4 days. That's all they'd needed. 4 more days and they would have been in the studio. Creating, making the music that was supposed to be their legacy. Instead, nothing. No recordings, no collaboration, just plans, just possibilities, just what could have been. At midnight, Dylan turned off the television. He sat in darkness. Somewhere in New York, John Lennon's body was in a morgue, and the music they were supposed to make would never exist. Dylan didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Lennon's voice. This is going to be remembered, but now it never would be. December 9th. Dylan's phone rang constantly. Journalists, friends, musicians, everyone wanted a statement. Dylan unplugged the phone. He couldn't talk about it. What was there to say? That he'd lost a collaborator? That seemed trivial compared to what Yoko had lost, what the world had lost. But it wasn't just about the session. It was about everything the session represented. 16 years of mutual respect. Two artists finally coming together. The moment when their separate legacies would merge into something new. That possibility was dead now. Dylan tried to work. He picked up his guitar. But every song felt hollow. Music had betrayed them. Music had brought them together, made them who they were. And music had been the reason David Chapman waited outside the Dakota. Fame had killed him, and fame came from music. On December 10th, Dylan watched the vigil outside the Dakota. Thousands of people, candles, flowers, signs saying why, a generation mourning. December 12th came, the day they were supposed to start recording. Dylan stayed in Malibu. The record plant in New York remained dark. The engineers who'd prepared the studio sat home mourning. The world moved on. But Dylan carried December 8th with him, the night that killed not just John Lennon, but the future they were supposed to create together. In the years after, Dylan was occasionally asked about their planned collaboration. What would they have recorded? He never answered directly. The pain was too fresh. But sometimes late at night, alone with his guitar, Dylan would play the fragments they discussed, song ideas that would never be finished, melodies that would never find their harmony. He'd saved notes from their conversations, scraps of paper with Lennon's ideas. Maybe something about growing older. Something that doesn't sound like the Beatles or like you. Something new. Dylan knew what they would have created. It would have been different from anything either had done. Lennon's melodic sensibility meeting Dylan's lyrical density. Lennon's directness meeting Dylan's surrealism. They would have pushed each other. Lennon would have challenged Dylan to be more direct, more emotional. Dylan would have challenged Lennon to be more complex, more layered. The tension would have created something neither could achieve alone. But most importantly, it would have been two friends making music, not legends. Just Bob and John in a studio, guitars in hand, creating because that's what they did. That's what hurt most. Not the lost masterpiece, not the historical significance, but the simple joy they would have had, laughing at mistakes, celebrating breakthroughs, drinking coffee at 2 a.m. while chasing a melody. Those moments got stolen, the human moments, the creative moments. Some things once lost can never be recovered. Dylan didn't attend Lennon's funeral. It was private. But on December 14th, 2 days after they were supposed to start recording, Dylan did something rare. He performed at a benefit concert in San Francisco, and he played a Beatles song. I Want You, She's So Heavy, one of Lennon's darkest compositions. Dylan played it raw and electric, his voice cracking. The audience stood in silence. Everyone understood. Dylan's way of saying goodbye. After the song, Dylan spoke. 4 words. That was for John. Then he walked off stage. Years later, in 1987, Dylan addressed the planned collaboration publicly. An interviewer asked about his biggest regret in music. John and I were going to record together. December 1980. We had it all planned. Then he was gone. That's my biggest regret. Not that we didn't make a masterpiece, but that we didn't get to try. That's what I miss. The chance to create with someone I respected that much. In 1995, Dylan was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. During his speech, he mentioned Lennon. John and I never got to make our record. Maybe in some parallel universe we did. And maybe in that universe, December 8th never happened. That's the universe I wish I lived in. 15 years after Lennon's death, the pain was still visible in Dylan's face. Some wounds never heal, some music never gets made. The record plant kept the studio booked for December 12th to 18th, 1980, even after Lennon's death. Engineers showed up not to record, but to sit in silence. They'd prepared for a historic session. Now it would forever remain empty. Years later, one engineer described that week. We'd set up 2 vocal booths, one for Bob, one for John, microphones ready, headphones hanging, guitars tuned. Nobody showed up. December 12th, I kept thinking maybe Bob would still come, but the studio stayed empty. Every day that week, I'd see those 2 microphones, empty chairs, guitars that wouldn't be played. By December 18th, I broke down. I'd worked with John on Double Fantasy. I knew how excited he was, and now it would never happen. The studio eventually recorded other artists, but for years, engineers would mention the Dylan-Lennon session, the one that never was. In 2010, 30 years after Lennon's death, The record plant closed. Before demolition, engineers who'd worked there in 1980 visited. They stood in the studio where Dylan and Lennon were supposed to record. One engineer, Jack Douglas, spoke that day. This room was supposed to witness history. Instead, it witnessed absence. The music that wasn't made. It reminds us that nothing is guaranteed, that we should create while we can. The record plant was demolished in 2011, but the story remained. 45 years have passed since December 8, 1980. Bob Dylan is now in his 80s. When asked about John Lennon, he usually deflects, but occasionally he reflects. Music is full of what-ifs, Dylan wrote in 2004. What if Buddy Holly hadn't died? What if Hank Williams had lived? With John, I lost not just a peer, but a collaboration. That's a unique kind of loss. The planned Dylan-Lennon session has become legendary in music history. Books speculate about what they would have recorded. Musicologists analyze their styles, trying to imagine the fusion. Fans debate endlessly, but Dylan knows the truth. It doesn't matter what they would have created. What matters is they never got the chance. In 2020, on the 40th anniversary of Lennon's death, Dylan released a statement. John called me in November 1980. We made plans. Then December 8th happened and everything ended. I think about that phone call sometimes, his voice, his energy. And I remember that we never know how much time we have. Create while you can. Love while you can. Live while you can. That's what John's death taught me. The recording session that never happened has become more famous than many sessions that did. It's a reminder that music exists not just in what's recorded, but in what's possible. Somewhere in an alternate timeline, Bob Dylan and John Lennon recorded together in December 1980. Maybe it was brilliant, maybe just good, maybe it changed music forever. But in this timeline, we'll never know. Maybe the saddest songs are the ones that remain unwritten. Maybe the most powerful music is the music that never gets made. December 8, 1980, the day the music died before it was born.